It is Thursday, August 12th here at Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me, as always, is Jared Smola. And it's been a while since we did one of these, Jared, but we've got a lot going on at DraftSharks.com lately. We've drafted 5 of 6 DS Invitational leagues. We have streamed every one of those drafts right here over the past week and a half. We got one more of those coming tonight, so come on back for that one. We posted 2 of our big 3 annual articles this week, the breakout pick on Monday, the first round bust on Wednesday. Our sleepers article hit the site on Tuesday. That same day, I had JJ Zachariason on the podcast. Plenty more sprinkled in throughout. So lots going on. It's been a little tough to find the time to get this last division preview in.
And we got undervalued players hitting the site today. We got overvalued players coming tomorrow. We got the perfect draft articles coming next week. So we're rocking here. I'm a little worried that I'm already as exhausted as I am, and it's only in the middle of August. We got 5 months to go, but yeah, we're churning everything out here. Feels good.
Well, we'll be taking a breath and doing player projections for each week in no time at this point.
Exactly.
And we've still got preseason games to really get started. We got one last week, but we've got the first full slate of them starting tonight and through this weekend. So lots going on. You should head to DraftSharks.com, check it all out, become a DS Insider so you can get access to everything that we're doing on there. But as I said, we are here primarily to do the final episode of the division preview series. We already did 7 of the 8 divisions. The last is the AFC East. That is going to be today's focus, and it starts with your 2020 division champions, the Buffalo Bills. Jared, anything relevant on the coaching change front with the Bills?
No coaching changes here, which is a good thing, and I think it's definitely a mark in favor of this offense. We have Sean McDermott back as head coach, Brian Dable back to run the offense for his 4th season in Buffalo, and we know how good this Bills offense was last year in real life and fantasy football. The Bills finished 2nd in total yards. They were 2nd in points. They were 5th in Football Outsiders offensive DVOA, 11th in situation neutral pace. So they ran a bunch of plays. And they, of course, were one of the pass heaviest offenses in the NFL. They actually finished just 12th in pass rate, but they were 3rd in situation neutral pass rate. Just the fact that they went 13-3 and played with so many leads. I think it actually, it brought the pass rate down a little bit. So as we get into 2021 projections here, I actually have them passing a bit more this season. Just, I think it's likely that, they take a step back in the win-loss department, probably find themselves trailing a bit more this season.
Yeah, the rise in passing rate for the Bills last year was a shock to us all, really. I mean, in hindsight, you can see why they did it, but it surprised us all at the time. Only San Francisco, Pittsburgh, and Houston saw a bigger increase in passing share last year than the Bills did. The 49ers went 6-10. The Texans went 4-12. The Steelers then fired their offensive coordinator at the end of the season. So, I mean, if you look at those 4 teams, you might say the Bills are the only of the 4 to actually do it on purpose, passing the ball that much more often. So for projecting them, I just stuck with the 60-40 split from last season. We'll see where it goes from there, but I can understand why they got to that number, and I think they're still built to do it similarly.
Yeah, again, I took them up to 61.5% pass, just, projecting a bit more negative game script for them, which it might not be the case. I think they're going to be good again, but they also, again, they went 13-3 last year. It's tough to project them to do that again.
Plus, I mean, if they are as good again, record-wise, it's not like they're not going to be succeeding offensively. So even if they're passing the ball a little bit less, they're probably doing it efficiently. So I think anything in that range is just fine for projecting those numbers.
Yep.
QB notes, Josh Allen went from, the rushing makes him good in fantasy before last year to just bona fide stud quarterback last season. He completed the biggest accuracy turnaround for any quarterback in NFL history. The Bills then obviously believed in it and rewarded him with the 2nd largest QB contract ever, only a little bit behind Patrick Mahomes in the same offseason. If you check our quarterback rankings and Josh Allen's ADP, it's clear that everybody believes in him at this point. I guess, Jared, my question is, this past year it was Josh Allen. The year before it was Lamar Jackson making the big leap in terms of where they sit among fantasy quarterbacks. Is there a higher floor for Josh Allen this year than there was for Lamar Jackson last year?
I don't know. I mean, the argument against Allen's floor is like, do you totally believe in the turnaround? This guy goes from a sub 60% completion rate guy throughout his college and first 2 NFL seasons, then all of a sudden he's up around 70%. I kind of buy into it, just, watching him play, and you read some of the stuff he's done with like mechanics and working with different quarterback gurus and all that stuff. And again, I think continuity is a big mark in favor of this offense. Same offensive system. Allen returns his top 2 wide receivers in Diggs and Beasley from last year. So I'm kind of buying into it. I just think the risk with Allen is that, last year was kind of the outlier if you look at his entire football career so far.
Yeah, I mean, I believe in the work that was put in to get him there. I believe in the coaching staff, and I believe in the surrounding talent. So I'm fine betting on the passing to continue. I think one risk with him is that the rushing touchdowns, go away. And none of us expects Josh Allen to run the ball significantly less. I think he'll still be in those goal line plans and, call his own number near the goal line. But, sheer luck could take 3 rushing touchdowns off his number. I think really the biggest knock on Josh Allen is he's second in what's a pretty tightly packed top, 5, 6, 7, depends on exactly who you like, but a fairly packed top group at quarterback. Yeah,
and he is second in our rankings right now. But yeah, I mean, like you said, I'll take Allen if he, ends up is the 4th or 5th quarterback off the board. But, in most cases, he tends to go before that. I'd rather just wait, half a round to a round for a Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray. The rushing touchdowns, 8 of them last year, that, probably project that to come down a bit. But, the Bills do use him as their goal line back. He led the Bills in carries inside the 5 last year with 9 of them. That was second most among quarterbacks. So maybe he doesn't score 8 times again, but I do think he's a good bet for, 5 or 6 at least.
Yeah, not to mention if he shaves a couple off that, maybe he's throwing the ball a little bit more in the red zone. So,
sure.
I mean, really no big concerns about Josh Allen overall. Even if he doesn't finish second, it's tough to imagine him finishing lower than, 5th or 6th, barring injury.
Yep.
Running back notes, it's a worthwhile competition. I'm not sure how much of a competition it is. There hasn't been much buzz from it that I've seen, at least. And really, it might not ultimately matter too much because of the Josh Allen factor we just talked about near the goal line. I don't know that anybody in this backfield has 10-plus touchdown upside. I don't know that anybody in this backfield is going to catch 60 passes. So it probably doesn't really matter that much. Now, it's Zach Moss versus Devin Singletary, basically for our purposes. I'm not even sure the Bills consider it a competition. Brian Daboll said to the Buffalo News earlier this month about what he wants from his running backs: gain yards, know who to block, and block them in pass protection. So that seems like it could be a mark in Zach Moss's favor. He rated much better than Devin Singletary in pass protection last year, according to Pro Football Focus grading. Moss actually spent a higher percentage of his offensive snaps in pass protection than Singletary did as well. Also graded out a little bit better as a receiver. So, maybe that's the edge that gets Zach Moss on the field a little bit more, gives him more fantasy upside than Devin Singletary.
Yeah, and the word out of Bills camp early on was that Moss was out playing Singletary, and then yesterday, Wednesday, August 11, Moss goes down with the hamstring injury.
Of course.
And durability was the biggest question on him coming in to see how long he's out for. I do think Moss is the upside play here. He could add to that receiving total, but beyond that, I mean, Allen led the Bills with 9 carries inside the 5. Moss had 8 though. Singletary was down at 3, so it was Allen and Moss at the goal line. So I do think, in this high scoring offense, like Zach Moss could score 7 or 8 times this season. And if he does that, he's probably going to beat ADP. So that's kind of the upside with him. I do think it's going to remain a committee though. I don't think that Devin Singletary is going away. And then, I mean, you do have Matt Breida too. I mean, there are Matt Breida fans out there. He's kind of disappointed throughout his career so far, but he's there and could potentially turn this into a 3-man backfield.
Well, here's the thing: is Matt Breida. I mean, I guess at this point you have to look at his career as a positive, considering he arrived as an undrafted free agent. But he did his stuff with the 49ers, who they make running backs blossom.
Yeah.
So the Niners then traded him to Miami. Miami, after trading a draft pick to get Matt Breida, dumped him at the end of the first season and, pushed him down the depth chart behind Myles Gaskin and other guys before dumping him. So at this point, Matt Breida's got to show me in the regular season a reason to believe in him, or at the very least get to the end of the preseason with the Bills talking him up as a factor. I'm not interested in Breida in fantasy drafts right now. Moss versus Singletary, I agree that Moss is the higher upside play, really because I think he's more of the power back and has the better chance of scoring those touchdowns. Like you said, the Bills like Singletary to some degree. I'm not sure how much they like him, especially if you look at the end of last year when Zach Moss went down in the playoffs. Devin Singletary got 38% of Bills carries while Moss was out in those playoff games. I mean, that's a small sample, and they didn't do much to address that backfield since then. So they're probably not too worried about Devin Singletary, but that makes me lean toward Moss, and I'm not particularly interested in taking Singletary if they don't trust him near the goal line.
Yeah, I mean, there were games where TJ Yeldon was playing ahead of Singletary late last year, right? So it just kind of feel like the Bills might have kind of soured on Singletary at this point. So it's not a backfield I'm targeting heavily in drafts, but Moss is definitely the Bills running back I'm more interested in.
Yeah, I'm not chasing anybody up the board, but it's Moss and very little Singletary for me. Singletary is kind of like Chase Edmonds, but without the receiving upside.
Yeah, yep, that makes sense.
Pass catcher notes, Stefan Diggs became an alpha in his first season in Buffalo last year. Only Davante Adams beat him in target share league-wide. Diggs tied for fourth in producing top-shelf weeks among wide receivers, according to our wide receiver scoring review. Slightly lower in putting up top 12 weeks, tied for sixth in that category, so certainly not terrible. Only Tyreek Hill, Davante Adams, Calvin Ridley edged Stefan Diggs in putting up top 24 weeks among PPR receivers.
Yeah, and he does that all in his first year with a new team and an off season that was impacted by COVID. So super impressive. I don't expect much to change for Diggs as far as volume and efficiency goes this season. I mean, Buffalo just basically replaced John Brown with Emmanuel Sanders, and everything else is kind of the same in this wide receiver core. The kind of spot where Diggs has room for growth, I think, is in the touchdown department. He only scored on 6% of his catches last season. That's well below the average for wide receivers. Diggs had an 8% touchdown rate across his 5 seasons in Minnesota, and it wasn't really for a lack of opportunity. He was sixth among wide receivers in red zone targets last season. So I think he just got a bit unlucky in the touchdown department. So he has the upside to score 10 times in this offense.
And we know that he can talk, so maybe he can try to talk Josh Allen into calling his own number less near the goal line and tossing it Diggs' way a little bit more.
Yep.
Cole Beasley was a solidly reliable wide receiver 3 last year. His biggest contribution to the offseason has been as a vaccine denier, and we won't debate that on this particular show, but I do think that it is leading Cole Beasley to be underrated in fantasy drafts at this point. Now, he's not a league winner, so I don't think it's that big a deal, but he was top 36 in 8 of his 15 games last year. Now he's going in the 50s in ADP.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to beat that price tag, and I don't know if it's the vaccine stuff or just the fact that it's Cole Beasley. Like, he's just not an exciting guy to draft. He's like a poor man's Jarvis Landry. Like, drafters just don't get excited about that. But again, I mean, there's not much change here. Maybe like Emmanuel Sanders steals some of Beasley's target share. I think they're going to kind of work in similar areas. I think Sanders is kind of that shorter range guy too at this point of his career. But I don't think Beasley's role is going to change much. So again, he's a value where he's going. He's a good guy just to have on your bench, especially, talking full PPR leagues, just, even in best ball to kind of lay a floor weekly, and then in lineup setting leagues, like, you probably don't want to be starting him every week, but as a bye week option, I think, he's a guy you can count on for like 4 to 6 targets or 4 to 6 catches every game.
Yeah, I mean, he's a no-brainer at cost in best ball because you have to not believe in the Bills' offense to not believe that Cole Beasley will pay off at his price tag, unless you just think that the Bills are going to cut him. I've honestly not bought that storyline at any point, regardless of how much of a pain he is about the vaccination stuff. Emmanuel Sanders drawing positive reviews from camp. Bills obviously like him. He's probably a better player than Cole Beasley, even at this point late in Emmanuel Sanders' career, but he is 34. His price has not gotten too high, so I like Emmanuel Sanders, and I think his price in drafts has been suppressed by kind of a surprising number of people liking Gabe Davis.
Yeah, and I was interested in Davis early on, even after they signed Sanders, just kind of not knowing what the wide receiver rotation would look like. But it sure sounds like it's going to be Diggs, Sanders, and Beasley as the top 3. I think, Buffalo kind of, at least for now, wants to just keep Davis in that situational deep threat red zone role, kind of what he played last year, at least when John Brown was healthy. So I think Sanders is at least, the 3rd best wide receiver option in fantasy football on the Bills. And, I think there's a chance he outscores Cole Beasley. Like you said, Sanders 34 now. He was still good last year, though, 23rd in yards per route run among 84 wide receivers with 50 plus targets. The Bills there's been stories that, they've kind of had their eye on Sanders for multiple seasons now. They finally get him in free agency. He gets, $6 million, a decent sized contract for 2021. So yeah, he's a guy I've been drafting quite a bit. He still goes outside the top 50 wide receivers in ADP.
Yeah, the downside risk on Beasley is that we didn't really get to see last year what it looked like with Diggs in there, with a healthy John Brown, and with Beasley, to see what his target share looked like in that scenario. The way the Bills operated this offseason indicates that they think Emmanuel Sanders is at least a slight upgrade on John Brown, because they gave John Brown the boot and then signed Emmanuel Sanders for, decent money. I think it was like $5 or $6 million on a 1-year deal. So he's clearly, a short-term solution, but a guy that they like in that short term, and that's what suppresses Gabe Davis for me.
Yeah, Sanders got $6 million. I think it was fully guaranteed on his contract, so a pretty nice deal. He just seems like a good fit in this offense. Sanders, I think, is the older version of Steph Diggs. I think they have similar games, kind of similar builds. I think they're both good route runners, more short intermediate guys. So I just think Sanders fits what the Bills like to do in their passing game.
Mm-hmm. Gabriel Davis did awesome with touchdowns as a rookie. Certainly produced more than any of us was really expecting, but saw just 10.4% target share. That was with John Brown battling injuries through basically the whole season. The Gabriel Davis case feels a little bit like Robert Foster from a couple of years ago with the Bills to me.
Yeah, Davis to me is like a wide receiver handcuff. If any of those top 3 guys go down, he becomes close to a full-time player in this excellent passing game. So then you're going to want him. But if he's the 4th wide receiver, he's just not going to be on the field enough to be someone we can trust.
Yeah, and I think that his ADP, at least on Underdog, has now climbed past handcuff territory when he's going ahead of Cole Beasley and I think Emmanuel Sanders even.
Yeah, that just I just think you're kind of not paying attention if you're drafting Davis over those guys.
Right. Dawson Knox. Nothing special. A tight end 3, I think, for best ball teams, and really not even particularly attractive there. We'll see if his offseason work on his hands helps. I guess he got a hand-eye coordination coach. We'll see if that does anything. I think there's a non-zero chance that Jacob Hollister outscores him this year, though.
Yeah, it's possible. I still think there's a chance the Bills end up with Zach Ertz at some point. And even beyond that, Bills tight ends combined for 66 targets last year, despite, again, them being one of the pass heaviest offenses in the NFL. So just not a situation I'm interested in.
Who I like, there aren't many Bills that I'm actively targeting here, just because I think that they're mostly appropriately priced. Zach Moss was one of my favorite early targets. He hasn't been as much lately, basically because the early running backs have gotten pushed down in drafts. So I find myself drafting, 3 or even 4 early in drafts and then just not looking at the position in the range where Moss is going now.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm not super interested in Moss. He's okay if I need a 4th running back at that point. Emmanuel Sanders is definitely my favorite, just pure value on the Bills. He's wide receiver 64 in ADP right now. Cole Beasley, wide receiver 56. He's fine. And then Allen and Diggs especially, as a late first, early second round pick. I just think he's super safe. Again, there's just so much continuity here. I really think he's just gonna he's gonna have a similar season to what he did last year. And again, there's upside for a few extra touchdowns this year.
Yeah, when you come in and command that kind of target share immediately, you're DeAndre Hopkins.
Yep.
Who I don't like, Gabriel Davis is really the only guy that I don't like at cost here.
Yep, Davis and the tight end situation.
Mm-hmm. Miami Dolphins coaching changes. The Dolphins head into year 3 under head coach Brian Flores, but it'll be the 3rd straight year of new offensive coordinators. It was Chad O'Shea in 2019. It was Chan Gailey last year. Now it's a combo platter of George Godsey and Eric Studsville. So it's time to get excited about that one. And I'm going to go ahead and call him Studsville, even if it's pronounced differently. The official titles for the guys are Godsey is the co-offensive coordinator and tight ends coach. Studsville is co-OC and running backs coach. The team apparently will not tell us who's calling plays. I guess we'll find out Saturday when they face the Bears, although I'm fully expecting this team to have them both whispering with something up in front of their mouths so that we can't actually tell who's sending the plays into the quarterback. It seems like the move that a former Belichick assistant, Brian Flores, would do. Godsey has called plays in the NFL before, so shouldn't be surprised if it ends up being him. He served as OC in Houston in 2015 and 16. Studsville has coached running backs for a long time. He was the interim head coach for a brief period for the 2010 Broncos after Josh McDaniels got fired. So, we'll see where things go with these guys.
Yeah, and even Godsey's time in Houston was under Bill O'Brien, who, I think he probably had a pretty big say in that offense. I don't know, the whole co-OC thing kind of has me uneasy. The saying about quarterbacks, if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. Like, is it, I don't know, if you have two OCs, you have none. So that's kind of my biggest concern with this Dolphins offense, which otherwise I'm kind of optimistic about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there are things to be optimistic about. There are also things to be concerned about. So we'll get more into that as we go forward. The run-pass split, both of these OCs have operated in offenses that ran about 58-42 in pass run split to this point. Last year's Dolphins actually went 58-42. So I landed on 59-41 when I was doing my numbers, but I think anywhere in that area is a good level for expectations.
Yep, I went 58.5% pass. I was actually kind of surprised to see Miami was 7th in situation neutral pass rate last season. Again, that was under a different offensive coordinator, but they did make two big additions to this wide receiver core. You have Tua, a top pick entering year 2. So I think there's a chance they lean on the pass a bit more than they did last season.
Yeah, and I mean, it's worth noting that for last year's team, they imported Jordan Howard and Matt Breida and then clearly didn't like what they got in both of those guys. They lost Myles Gaskin for 6 games. So maybe they wanted to run more than they did, and they just couldn't because of what they had in that offense.
Yep, that's fair.
QB notes, Tua Tagovailoa took over as the starter in week 8 last year, but took over might be a little bit strong because Ryan Fitzpatrick stepped in for him at Denver in week 11, stepped in for him at Vegas in week 16. So they always had somebody warming up in the bullpen, even while Tua was working for that team. Tua averaged just 200.5 passing yards per game as a starter last year, 35th among 44 qualifiers in on-target pass rate, according to Pro Football Reference. I don't think Tua brings the rushing to be a truly intriguing fantasy QB, but there's a good group of pass catchers this season.
Yeah, so there's nothing you can point to from Tua last year to get you optimistic for this year. I'm just kind of willing to give him a mulligan. He's a rookie in a weird offseason, coming off that serious hip injury. Miami's offensive line was not good. They were 21st in PFF's pass blocking grades. That the pass catching core was weak, especially when you had Devontae Parker missing a couple games. Preston Williams missed the entire second half of the season. So there were definitely excuses for Tua. You look back at his prospect profile, 5th overall pick of his draft. Set Alabama school records for passing yards and touchdowns as a sophomore. Was really on a similar pace as a junior before that hip injury. So I still have some optimism here. I'm with you. He's not going to put up big rushing numbers. I think he can give you 200-300 yards though and a couple of scores. He's not a statue in the pocket. And then you throw in the additions of Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle, and this suddenly looks like what could be a pretty strong wide receiver core. So Tua's a guy I like. He's cheap enough where I like him. You don't have to draft him as your starter. You can take him as your quarterback 2 in best ball or just a backup in lineup setting leagues. And I do think there's some upside where he could at least be a nice spot start option in fantasy this season.
Yeah, I'm fine with him as a best ball QB. I think I'm less interested as a fantasy backup just because I can also wait beyond that and get Derek Carr. And I think at least the same level, and somebody that I've seen do it, Ben Roethlisberger, Daniel Jones, all those guys around even later.
Yeah, I guess Tua just has the allure of the unknown, where I feel like his upside's higher than Carr. We've kind of seen Carr's ceiling at this point, I think, or Tua again with these weapons. And I at least as a prospect, I think Tua beat Carr. So to me, there just feels like there's a bit more upside with Tua.
Yeah, I think Derek Carr has shown us the upside that I expect from Tua. I think they're both if they finish higher than QB 16, you're like, whoa, where'd that come from?
That's fair.
RB notes, Myles Gaskin drew 54% of Dolphins carries last year, 18.5% of the targets when he was healthy. Obviously, that target share is coming down. It was 11.6% in Tua starts. The carry share, though, in those games was 68%. So, I mean, if you put all of it together, Myles Gaskin got workhorse level touches for those Dolphins last year. Now, there's certainly no guarantee that he does something similar this year. I certainly would not expect a 68% carry share. That's a level that few running backs get to at this point in the NFL. But, I mean, 50+% of carries and anything around 10% of targets would be good for him. He finished 11th in PPR points per game last year. Not a special performer efficiency-wise, but, still looks like the best back in the Miami backfield.
He definitely does. And, really last year, Miami, even when like you said, when Gaskin was healthy, he was getting, feature back workloads. And even when he wasn't healthy, Salvin Ahmed kind of got that. That Miami had a tendency to kind of lean on one running back throughout last season. Now, like we said, it's a new offensive coordinator, so maybe that's going to change. But yeah, so Gaskin, like you said, he was sort of just okay as a runner. He was good in the passing game, though. 87% catch rate, 9.5 yards per catch. He was third in yards per route run among 37 qualifying running backs. So at minimum, I think he's locked in as the primary pass catcher here. And really the offseason was a win for him, considering Miami only signed Malcolm Brown to a cheap 1-year deal, didn't draft anyone until the 7th round, and they returned Salvin Ahmed. So I think the door is open there for Gaskin to maybe not get the same workload he got last season, but to at least be Miami's clear lead back. And again, I think the pass catching stuff is definitely his.
I agree, and he's slipping in ADP. I think he's a value where he's going. My problem with getting him is I usually have 3 running backs by the time that he makes it to me as a choice, so it's a little tough to just find room for him. You mentioned that they added Malcolm Brown in free agency. They drafted Jared Dokes, who there was a stretch of excitement for him. I haven't heard much lately. Did return Salvin Ahmed. He didn't do a whole lot when Myles Gaskin returned healthy. Brown signed for $1.75 million, fully guaranteed, and he signed on the first day of free agency. So none of that is like guarantee significance this year, but it's clear that the Dolphins targeted him, brought him in for a reason. Brian Flores talked him up as an every down player, says he can do all the things that they need him to do. So Malcolm Brown's not a guy to get excited about, but he's probably a guy that's going to get more snaps and touches than people would like for him to get here.
Yeah, and the one area where Gaskin really struggled last year was at the goal line. And Brown's a bigger back, so I think there's a chance he vultures some touchdowns. That's not really enough to make Brown a fantasy option. He might just kind of be a thorn in Gaskin's side.
Yeah, I think Brown is somebody to toss onto a roster at the very end of a draft, mostly as a handcuff, and then we'll see if anything else comes out of that. He's basically the match for C.J. Anderson in athletic profile. You're talking about the thumper at the goal line, but they're seriously like identical in athletic profile.
I like it.
Salvin Ahmed has some fans out there. I'm not one of them. He didn't do anything special last year. Negative ratings in both DER and DVOA for Football Outsiders. Yeah,
and again, when Gaskin was healthy, Ahmed never topped 9 touches in any of Gaskin's healthy games. So, Miami clearly preferred Gaskin when he was healthy.
Anything else from that backfield? You got any Jared Dokes notes or Patrick Laird love?
I don't know why people are drafting Jared Dokes. Like, he's big and athletic, but he's a 7th round pick who had pretty poor college production. I haven't understood that one.
All right. We'll go on to pass catcher notes then. And this is the most interesting area of this team, but I think it also carries a lot of questions. The big issue, I think, for everyone probably is injuries. As we speak, Devontae Parker and Will Fuller are dealing with injuries. Parker has been kind of in and out. Fuller, I don't believe, has practiced since the beginning of camp because of a soft tissue issue. Jalen Waddle had an ankle scare early, but he's been pretty good since then on the health front. And then behind them, Preston Williams is on the pup. Albert Wilson's been having a solid camp, but he's hurt right now. So, we're going to have to answer all these injury questions before the drafts at the end of this month for fantasy owners.
Yeah, I'm officially worried about Will Fuller. He went down on July 28th and is still out. And there was one report that's a foot injury, but there's been no confirmation, no updates from the team. And again, it's been over 2 weeks now. So, and a guy with Fuller's injury history. Now, he is suspended for week 1 anyways, so he has a little extra time. But I'm officially worried about Fuller. And he was the Dolphins wide receiver I preferred. I think he's still highest in our rankings now, but he obviously comes with some risk. Parker's been back after he missed the first few days of camp. He's back in there. Parker was much better with Fitzpatrick last year than he was with Tua. The volume was pretty similar. He actually averaged, he was at 7.8 targets per game with Tua, 7.7 with Fitzpatrick, but he was just a lot more efficient with Fitzpatrick. So my concern with Parker is just, does he have that rapport with Tua?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see on the rapport front. That's something we can't really answer until the games get started, maybe until the real games get started. We'll see. When they're all healthy, I'm not sure how much separation there's going to be among Will Fuller, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Parker, and the ADP has them separated right now. Will Fuller's at wide receiver 43 in PPR drafts, according to the ADP on DraftSharks.com right now. Jalen Waddle's at wide receiver 46. Devontae Parker's at wide receiver 62. Yeah. So to me, that alone makes Parker the easy leader at this point.
And I've been taking shots on all 3 guys in best ball. As we get into lineup setting, though, it's kind of a situation I want to avoid because I do think they're all, we don't have any of them projected for 100 targets. And I just think it's going to be, pretty evenly split. This is not going to be a top 5 passing game. So I'm just not sure any of these three are going to be reliable on a week-to-week basis. I guess, Waddle is the guy that kind of excites me the most. Like, just 6th overall pick. Obviously the most explosive of the group. He's more explosive even than Will Fuller, I think, and has that rapport with Tua from their time together at Alabama. So I guess, even at the ADPs, he's kind of the guy I might take a shot on in lineup setting league, just in case he emerges as the clear leader.
Yeah, I mean, I think that none of them, I think, is going early enough for you to say, I got to stay away from him. For me, I agree, though. It's just a situation I don't want to plant a flag anywhere, especially when I get to a lineup management league. Mike Gesicki, probably a better prospect than any of the wideouts for me at this point on this team, considering who's going around him at tight end. He leaped up the yards per route run rankings last season, 11th among 48 qualifiers in that category after ranking 32nd among 44 the year before. Target share slightly higher in Tua's 8 starts last year, so that can't be a bad thing. And for fantasy, obviously, you like that Gesicki is more wide receiver than he is tight end.
So did he officially lose the Gesicki tag from you?
Yeah, I'm ready to lose Gesicki.
All right, he earned it. Yeah, like you said, I mean, he's improved every year so far. He finishes the top 7 fantasy tight end last year, and that was despite ranking only 12th among tight ends in targets. I think that'd be the concern for Gesicki this year is does he lose targets with these new wide receivers coming in? But he saw just 85 last year. Like I think that's a number he can get to. So. I think he's definitely in that, lower end tight end 1 mix. I'm definitely fine where he's going in drafts.
Yeah. And I mean, he was highly volatile in putting up those fantasy points. So if he had settled in at like tight end 7 in drafts this year, then I was prepared to be out on him again, but he's right in the bottom of that tight end 1 territory. So if you're taking him against guys like Robert Tonyan, Irv Smith, I mean, we're talking about guys that are probably going to be volatile week to week.
Yeah, Miami did add Hunter Long in the 3rd round of the draft, and this is Gesicki's final year of his rookie deal. So you kind of worry if he's part of their long-term plans and if that's going to impact his 2021. Long also went down with a knee injury, though, a few days ago. We haven't heard any updates on the severity yet. But I think Gesicki remains the clear leader here, but just something worth watching, I guess.
Yeah, Hunter Long's not the kind of guy that I expect to make a huge year 1 impact, even at full health. So I think that sure. I think Gesicki will maintain his role for this season, and then maybe whether he's with the team beyond that will depend upon the financials of it. So it certainly doesn't concern me for 2021.
Yep, I agree.
Who I like here, there's really nobody that I'm targeting among Dolphins. I think Gaskin has the highest ceiling versus where he's going in drafts. But, I mean, there's also a chance that he ends up as food for the RB dead zone.
Yeah, I'm with you. There's no one I like. There's no one I really dislike either. I think, that these guys are fine where they're going. Again, in best ball, I have been taking, Tua and 1 or 2 of his wide receivers just because I like the prices. I mean, all 3 of those wide receivers are outside the top 40 in ADP. Tua is going outside the top 20 quarterbacks in ADP. So it's been a nice, cheap best ball stack, but I'm less interested when you get into lineup setting leagues. I guess Gaskin is probably my favorite lineup setting league target if we're talking full PPR, because again, I do think he kind of has that role locked up. And I really think Gaskin's he's similar to Chase Edmonds in that way, where we feel good about both guys as their team's primary pass catcher, is just not sure how the carries are going to go.
And the way that you can use Myles Gaskin in lineup setting drafts is you can say, all right, do I want the running back or receiver here in round 3? And if it's really that close and you can't decide, take the wide receiver and figure you can probably get Myles Gaskin in round 5. And then, you insure behind him just in case he disappoints.
Yep.
On the who I don't side, Fuller and Waddle haven't done it for me. I'll take a share here or there on a best ball roster, but I'm away from them in roster management leagues. I mean, right behind Will Fuller is Jarvis Landry in ADP. Mike Williams is right in front of him. So, I mean, I'm not taking Will Fuller over either of those guys, at least with any regularity. And then Curtis Samuel, Marquise Brown, Michael Gallup, Darnell Mooney, Elijah Moore are all behind Waddle. And, I mean, I like each of those guys at least as much, if not more, straight up against Waddle. Yeah,
no arguments here. And Fuller, I'm gonna be off him until he gets back on the practice field here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's not like there's much injury history there to concern you.
Right.
New England Patriots, the coaching changes front, nothing meaningful on the staff here. We're in year 22 of Bill Belichick. We are in year 10 since Josh McDaniels returned to the team. last year was easily the worst Patriots offense that either of those has been a part of. And probably it's just a coincidence that it was the first time McDaniels was there with no Tom Brady, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this amazing to compare this offense to, what it was under Brady, just completely different.
Yeah, it was completely gross last year. And the run pass split will probably depend on how the quarterback battle sorts out, how soon they transition to Mac Jones. I think we all figure it's going to happen at some point this year, but how soon is still kind of ambiguous. Only Baltimore went more run heavy last year, and the Patriots went just 41% pass in their 7 wins last year. So if it's Cam Newton, I think we have to expect it to be no higher on the pass side than 50-50. If we get Mac Jones, I would bet on something more like a 57-43 split.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And, I haven't projected right now for 55% pass, and that's assuming like Mac Jones starts like 2/3 of the games, which I guess I'm a little less confident in now, with the reports we're getting out of camp. It sounds like they're playing kind of to a draw so far, though I think, Newton's still getting more of the first team reps. So at this point, I do expect Cam to be in there to start the season. I also still expect Mac Jones to get in there at some point, when that's going to happen. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I projected them at 55-45 too. And, this is an example of being careful when you're reading camp reports, because you could get reports from different guys on the same day, and one saying Cam Newton is clearly the leader. He's in first on all the drills. He's in first when it's team workout portions. And then somebody else can say Mac Jones does what Josh McDaniels wants the offense to do. It's only a matter of time until he's in there. So keep in mind that even somebody who's simply reporting what's happening in front of them is bound to have some biases, even if they don't realize it as they're reporting. So moving on to the QB notes, all factors obviously were working against Cam Newton last year, basically as much as they possibly could. He was coming off foot and shoulder injuries in Carolina. He did not sign until the end of June. He then had the COVID offseason in his first year with the team, so that limited his work and exposure to teammates and coaches. A brutal receiving core, lost Julian Edelman after 6 games. The top 2 targets for the Patriots last year were Jacoby Myers and Damiere Byrd, who's not even with the team anymore. I mean, things have to be better for Cam Newton this year. Of course, it doesn't sound like, as you said, either of these quarterbacks is pulling away from the other as we have Cam Newton going against Mac Jones here.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Newton, though, is despite all that, he finished quarterback 20 in fantasy points. The guy averaged 177 passing yards and like a little over a half a touchdown passing per game, and he still finished quarterback 20 because of that rushing. He ran it 137 times for 592 yards, 12 touchdowns, which is you have to project it to come down a bit. But Newton was also 4th in the entire NFL in carries inside the 5-yard line. Not 4th among the entire NFL, including running backs. He had 19 carries inside the 5-yard line. He was 6th in the NFL in carries inside the 10. So, I mean, to me, like Newton, if he's when he's starting the season, he's still going to be a fantasy factor, I think, because of that rushing ability. And Mac Jones, I don't think he's going to be a fantasy factor, because I just think he's not going to give you anything with his legs, and I don't expect big passing totals from him.
Yeah, I mean, neither, because of the uncertainty, I think neither is an option outside of Superflex, 2 quarterback, or like a third best ball QB kind of spot. But Newton, obviously the much higher ceiling fantasy option in those cases. Mac Jones, I agree. It's going to be tough for him to be fantasy relevant for himself. He's probably better for the Patriots passing game options, though.
Yeah, I think he's better for the passing game options and the backfield, which we can get into here.
That's right. RB notes, and Damien Harris is up first. He's the leader of the backfield, and I agree. I think he probably needs Cam Newton to sit if he wants to approach his ceiling. Harris saw just 20% of Patriots red zone carries last year, according to Pro Football Reference. He saw 18% of their carries inside the 10, 11.5% of their carries inside the 5. Now, granted, Damien Harris missed 6 games, but so did Myles Gaskin, and by comparison, Myles Gaskin saw 34% of Dolphins carries in the red zone, 35.6% inside the 10, and 31% inside the 5. So basically tripling the share of Damien Harris in those regions.
Right. Harris is just going to get a lot of empty touches if Cam Newton's still in there. He's going to get the carries, until they get to the 10-yard line, and he's not going to do much in the passing game. Harris is another case where I think he can work in the passing game, but New England just they don't do that. Their lead runner just does not contribute in the passing game. They're going to keep using James White in that role. Harris had just 7 targets all last season. So now if Mac Jones gets in there, Harris starts getting the goal line carries, and then you're talking about a guy with some fantasy value. But if it's Cam Newton, I just think you're going to get 12 to 15 carries per game out of Harris. Pretty low touchdown chances and not much in the passing game.
I agree. And Sony Michel is apparently still a complication. Jeff Howe of The Athletic calls him 1B to Harris's 1A, says that Michel is having the best training camp of his career so far. So, I mean, Sony Michel is either going to stick as part of this committee and what has been a committee for most of the time that we've seen Bill Belichick in New England, or, I mean, at worst, all of this is just showcasing him as a trade option as his rookie contract runs out. And in that case, he lands in a backfield that needs him. So even if you don't believe Michel with the Patriots, he's going to be a factor for somebody's backfield, I think, this season.
Yeah, he's a guy I've started to take late in drafts, like super late, like FFPCs that go beyond 20 rounds. Just like you said, like he's going to be a factor in New England or he's going to land somewhere else and have a chance. He's a former first-round pick. Like those guys tend to get multiple chances. So I don't think Michel is dead quite yet. And
he opened last year as a starter ahead of Damien Harris until he got hurt.
Yep.
Ramondre Stevenson has been an avoid for me ever since he landed in New England. Now, the position coach for the Patriots says that Stevenson needs to work on everything. So, I mean, that's just another vote plus the Sony Michel stuff that ignore Ramondre Stevenson this year.
Yeah, definitely. I still think he has some intrigue as a dynasty stash. I mean, we see the Patriots do this. Like Damien Harris did not hit the field as a rookie. They might kind of have similar plans for Stevenson where he just takes a red shirt this year. It does not look like he's going to be a factor in 2021.
James White is a late round factor still. Best ball flyer for me. I can't say that I'm too interested for lineup management leagues. I will get a little bit more interested if they name Mac Jones the starter before the season. But as long as Cam Newton's starting, I can't imagine starting James White in a fantasy lineup.
Yep, that's exactly right. I think White needs Mac Jones under center. He needs, the Pats to go back to more of that traditional offense. But, James White remained super effective in the passing game last year. He was second in yards per route run and third in PFF receiving grade among 28 running backs with 40-plus targets. So he can still do it. He just needs that opportunity. And, if and when Mac Jones gets in there, I do think, White is going to go back to, someone who, sees 4, 5, 6 targets a game.
Pass catcher notes, there are individuals in here that can be intriguing, but it's way too crowded, I think, to be truly interesting. I mean, at this point, Jonnu Smith looks most intriguing among the guys. There are reports of him getting plenty of targets from both quarterbacks. Hunter Henry's timeline, of course, is uncertain now coming off the shoulder injury. But, it's still too crowded. I'm not chasing Jonnu Smith into the top 12 at the position if he gets there.
No, I'm not chasing him into the top 12. He's still outside of that in ADP. He is my favorite bet among these pass catchers. I mean, the Patriots went out like right when free agency opened and signed Jonnu Smith, 4-year, $50 million deal, and it makes him. He's tied for the league's third highest paid tight end with Hunter Henry, actually, who signed the next day. And Jonnu Smith, he was, I think, disappointing relative to expectations in Tennessee last year. They kind of stuck with more of a tight end committee than we wanted to see, but he was effective again, 14th among tight ends in yards per route run after finishing 7th in 2019. So a guy I am still optimistic about, and the Patriots obviously love him. So, there's a chance that Smith leads this team in targets this year.
Yeah, he was disappointing because of usage. I mean, whether that's his fault or the coach's fault, tough for any of us to say. The thing that keeps me from getting truly, I guess, excited about Jonnu Smith is that even if Hunter Henry's shoulder is an issue, he's going to be back at some point. And like you said, they paid them basically the same thing. So I just think this is going to be a frustrating situation. If you take Jonnu Smith as tight end 14, 15, cool, because you don't need that guy to go off for you. And maybe he does lead the Patriots in receiving this season.
Yeah, definitely a better best ball guy, I think, because you're right. I mean, when Henry's in there, the usage between those guys could be frustrating. I'm curious to see what this Patriots offense is going to look like. Like they're obviously going to be heavy 2 tight end sets after giving all that money to Smith and Henry. I looked back though over the previous few seasons. Like last year, the Titans led the league in percentage of plays with 2+ tight ends on the field at just 41% of their plays. The Eagles were up at 56% in 2019 as the league leader. The Eagles also led in 2018 at 42%. So, it's rare for a team to, get much above 50% of their snaps with two tight ends on the field. So, if that's the case, Smith and Henry both won't be fantasy factors, if one of them's only on the field for half of the snaps. So I'm curious to see what it looks like.
Yeah, you got to figure what they paid them, that they're both going to be on the field quite a bit, especially with how much they like to run the ball. But, it's just it adds to the crowd here. And, talking about money, they also paid all that money to Nelson Aguilar, $11 million a year over a couple of years on his contract in free agency. So, I guess you got to consider Nelson Aguilar first among receivers, even though Jacoby Myers has been the one getting more positive press than anybody else. Really, just I can't get myself truly interested in anyone in this group outside of late best ball shots.
Yeah, late best ball shots on Jacoby Myers for me, in full PPR. He was good last year, 10th in yards per route run among 84 wide receivers with 50-plus targets. The question with Myers, so, if New England's going to go all those two tight end sets, that means they're only going to have two wideouts on the field. So, are they comfortable using Jacoby Myers on the outside? And he did plenty of that last year. He was only in the slot 52% of his snaps last year. So, there's only going to be room for Jacoby Myers, Nelson Aguilar, and Kendrick Bourne. Only two of those guys are going to be full-time players here. So we'll see how that sorts out. Hopefully we get some clues in these preseason games.
Yeah, and I was all set to like Jacoby Myers more before they paid surprising money to both Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne after having that season from Jacoby Myers. It just doesn't make sense to me to do that if they like Jacoby Myers as much as his usage and production last year suggests that they should.
Yeah, and Belichick has obviously done a lot right in New England, but evaluating wide receivers is not something he's gotten right. So I don't think, he gets the benefit of the doubt, and we should assume that, Nelson Aguilar is now, this number one wideout and Kendrick Bourne's this useful piece. I think there's a chance that Jacoby Myers is still the best wide receiver on this team.
Yeah, I think ultimately I just want to be out on the whole group, and I'm not worried that somebody's going to have, 120 targets and catch 80 of them and score 8 times.
Agreed. Yep.
Who I like, there's really not a single like here. It's just too crowded at every single position for such a low ceiling offense for me to plant a flag with anybody.
Yeah, I'm with you there. No one I'm excited about. Again, I think James White at RB50 in PPR is probably a value, and I think definitely a value if Mac Jones takes over. And then Jonnu Smith would be my second favorite Patriot target. His ADP is somewhere around tight end 16 and tight end 18, depending on the source. So, at that price, you're taking him as a backup. And I think, he could at least give you some, spiked weeks this season based on his talent and just, what the Patriots paid him.
Mm-hmm. The guys I'm avoiding the most, I would say right now, Hunter Henry is probably the most hands-off because of the shoulder injury and, uncertainty even when he's healthy. Throughout draft season, though, I've been avoiding Damien Harris. His current PPR ADP on DraftSharks.com has him just ahead of Melvin Gordon, Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette, David Johnson, Zach Moss. And it's, he's certainly, I'm not saying those guys are all ahead of him for me, but that's where Damien Harris belongs because of his situation. So it's become a range that I'm mostly just avoiding, or I'll take whoever lasts beyond ADP rather than targeting any single player. And even if you look right behind that group, we've got A.J. Dillon, we've got James Conner, Gus Edwards. And those are the kinds of guys that might have a lower floor because we don't know what their carry projection is initially, but they also probably have higher ceilings because if one guy goes down in any of those three offenses, those guys could feast.
Yeah, Harris has been the avoid for me, especially talking full PPR. When you get into half PPR on like underdog, he becomes a bit more interesting. I think he's, okay in non-PPR. I'm not sure where his ADP is there, but if it's around RB30 and non-PPR, that makes more sense. But again, he's not going to do anything in the passing game. If Mac Jones takes over, then Harris will be more interesting. But I think early in the season it's going to be Cam Newton, and that's going to make Harris a guy who I would not want to be using in starting lineups.
Yeah, I agree with that. New York Jets to close things out here. Jared, tell me what's new about this coaching staff.
Oh, thank God, Adam Gase is finally gone. And I think that's big. Even we don't know. So it's Robert Saleh at head coach. He's a defensive mind. Mike LaFleur at offensive coordinator. We don't know much about LaFleur, but I just think getting Gase out of there is going to be an upgrade for this offense. So Mike LaFleur, 34 years old, which makes me feel bad that he's an OC and he's a year older than me, and I'm just doing this. He is Matt LaFleur's brother. Mike has worked under Kyle Shanahan since 2014, so that's kind of the coaching tree he's coming from. No play calling experience in the NFL. He has a few years of experience calling plays at St. Joseph's and at Davidson, in the college ranks. So, lower end college program. So, not a whole lot to go on here. I think you just sort of think he's going to model his offense kind of, again, off that, Kyle Shanahan scheme.
Hey, and Davidson to the pros worked for Steph Curry, so it should be fine for Michael Fleur. And we should probably do like an Adam Gase tribute and do this entire team with our eyes darting around the screen like that for the screen. What do you think?
I'm not capable of doing that.
Michael Fleur comes here as the passing game coordinator, wide receivers coach in a run favoring offense. So, we'll see what that means for what he prefers as in terms of run pass split. The Jets look better set up to pass than run. They're third from the bottom in Vegas projected win totals. So I think that we should probably expect this team to lean pass. I wonder how much they want to pass with a rookie quarterback starting for the first time. For projections, I put them at 58-42. I think they would like to probably fall short of 60%, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go well past 60%.
Yeah, agree with all of that. I have them at 58% too. And I do think, situation neutral pass rate's probably going to be lower with, a defensive minded head coach and a rookie quarterback and all that. But this is going to be, a bottom end team. So I think game script is going to, force them to pass it a bit more.
QB note, Zack Wilson looks like the top bust candidate, I think, for everybody among the top four quarterbacks. If we're looking at them and saying somebody's going to bust, just historically speaking, he's the one that people pick. And, it's because he had just one strong year of play/production at BYU. He didn't really have to deal with much adversity there. He had terrific blocking. He had weak opponents. Then he landed with a traditionally struggling franchise. All that said, there's clearly plenty of talent with Zack Wilson. He seems like a smart guy. He's saying the right things here, and they've put some solid receivers around him to begin.
They have, yeah. I like the wide receiver core, and we'll get to Michael Carter. He can do some stuff in the passing game. This entire offense, they're going to have four rookies playing, massive week one roles in Zack Wilson, Michael Carter, wide receiver Elijah Moore, and then the guard Elijah Vera Tucker that they took in the first round. So just a super young offense. I'm not interested in Wilson for lineup setting leagues, and like best ball, the case for him is like he goes so late, and he's going to be in there for week one. He's very likely going to start all 17 games if he stays healthy. So you kind of have that just setting a floor if you're looking for like a late quarterback 2 or quarterback 3 in best ball.
And maybe the best case for him is Elijah Moore, but we'll get to that in a few minutes.
Yes.
Running back notes, Michael Carter is the fantasy hope here, but it's probably bad for him that he's going way ahead of the rest of the Jets backfield in drafts. I had JJ Zacharyson on the podcast Tuesday, as I mentioned, where he talked about his research into mid-round breakout running backs, and also something that he has addressed on his own podcast where I heard it first. Basically, though, the takeaway for us here is that mid-round running back breakouts historically come from ambiguous backfields, and that's like a backfield where a couple of guys are going fairly close together in those middle rounds, and ADP has generally done a good job of picking the first guy that ends up being the guy that performs better, just historically speaking. When the running backs are more spread out, one guy's going early, and even in the middle rounds, round 5, 6, 7, if the next guy is going way later, then that first guy has not fared so well. And that's what we're looking at here. And even if you just step back from the particular situation, logically, it makes sense because a split like that means that we don't love the player. We don't love the situation. Otherwise, Michael Carter would be going earlier than he is. So you're buying a relatively unexciting player from a bad situation. And that's just not generally a recipe for fantasy success.
Yeah, the thing with Carter is just that the competition is so ugly. It's all these holdovers from the previous regime, like Ty Johnson, Michael Piron, Josh Adams, and then they signed Tevin Coleman, who has a lot of experience in again that Kyle Shanahan running scheme. So that's kind of the mark in his favor, and he's just like a veteran who's been around, gotten decent sized workloads. But he's 28 years old now. He was had 28 carries last season. He was hurt all year. Wasn't good when he did get the ball. And he got he got less than $500,000 guaranteed on his 1-year deal. So, the contract says, he's probably not even a lock to make the team. So, and then, Carter already running with the first team offense in training camp. Multiple beat writers have said, he looks like the team's best running back. It's going to be a committee. Like Carter is probably never going to be, a workhorse back. He's just, he's a bit undersized, but I feel confident in him leading this backfield in targets right out of the gate. And I think there's a decent chance he leads it in carries, even if it's, not as a, heavy rushing workload guy, but, a guy who gets, 12, 13, 14 carries a game.
Mm-hmm. He's certainly the top fantasy option here. And at RB31 and ADP, it's certainly not a terrible price, mid-round 8. Tevin Coleman, though, is the next Jets running back off the board, and he's going 9.5 rounds later. I mean, I'm not going to tell anybody to not take Michael Carter, but I don't have any reason to get excited about taking Michael Carter.
Yeah, I do think he's fine in the range he's going. I just generally haven't been taking running backs there. I'm usually taking, wide receivers, even tight ends. It's kind of like the Noah Fant, Dallas Goedert, Tyler Higbee type of territory. So I don't have a ton of Carter, but, if you're looking for a running back there, again, I do think he's not, to me, much dissimilar to like Chase Edmonds, where, I think Carter kind of has that passing game role locked up, and then, the carries we'll see, but there's a chance again that he leads the Jets in carries.
And that's probably a good comparison in that the upside you're looking for is like RB24 level.
Yep.
LaMichael Pirine, Ty Johnson, I wouldn't be surprised if they turn in relevant fantasy weeks this season, but I'm not at all interested in them unless it's a very deep league at draft time.
No, me either. It has been Coleman running with the first team alongside Michael Carter. So it does look like, they're going to open the season as the Jets' top 2 backs.
Pass catcher notes, a much more interesting area for the Jets than the backfield is. And for me, it's Elijah Moore and everyone else, at least for fantasy consideration. I don't know how the targets are going to be spread around in this offense. I don't know how much the team is going to end up passing. So I'm just going to chase who I think is the top talent, especially if he is a versatile player. He checked all of the prospect boxes that we look for in wide receivers. The team has said that they considered him a first-round level talent, would have looked at him if they had stayed at that spot instead of moving up for Elijah Vera-Tucker in round 1. He's been lighting up practices since he arrived by multiple reports. And I mean, Elijah Moore's ADP has climbed, but he's still wide receiver 52 in our PPR ADP. He's wide receiver 51 in FFPC main event ADP. So I just think at that level, he's the kind of player that I could see at being a win rate leader by season's end. And he's still going at a low risk price.
Yeah, I am so surprised his ADP has not climbed more. Like he's been the buzziest player in fantasy football since the spring. Like, since the moment he stepped on the field in spring workouts, he was dominating, and that's continued into training camp. I think it's just because he's on the Jets. Like, people just can't get excited about someone on the Jets. But yeah, it's nice when someone is this good in the offseason when we, thought he was that good of a prospect to begin with. Like you said, he more checked the production box in a big way. He tested really well. The tape looks awesome. I don't know if you saw Daniel Jeremiah compared him to Tyler Lockett, which, the guy we love. And I think it's a good comparison, a bit undersized, but explosive on the short stuff, can get downfield as well. So yeah, I'm not like convinced Elijah Moore is going to lead this team in targets. I still think there's a chance it's Corey Davis. But again, we can get into Davis, but I've been taking both of those guys because they're both going super late. And I just think this Jets offense is not going to be a disaster, with Adam Gase finally out of the way.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If Elijah Moore was like wide receiver 35 in ADP, you'd be saying, I'm sure he's going to lead the team in targets. But at wide receiver 52, you're like, if I have to pick somebody to lead this team in targets, it's Elijah Moore. It might not happen. But if it does, then he could really pay off from where I'm taking him. Like, is Elijah Moore's fantasy ceiling for this season really any lower than Jamar Chase's?
No, it's not. It's not.
That's where I'm at on him too. So give me the Corey Davis case.
Yeah, I mean, Corey Davis has a lot of haters. He's been, I think it's fair to say, for the majority of his career so far, he's been disappointing. But I think there are reasons for that. He's had some injury stuff. He was on some, bad Titans passing games, Titans teams that, just haven't passed it much in general. But I mean, he's still only 26 years old. He was the 5th overall pick of his draft. He had a good prospect profile, and he's coming off a really nice year in Tennessee. He finished 29th among wide receivers in PPR points in 14 games, but he was 5th in yards per route run among 84 qualifying wide receivers. We know yards per route run is like one of the most predictive metrics. And then he gets the big 3-year, $37.5 million deal in free agency. I mean, I think, when the Jets signed him to that deal, they were, signing him to be the number 1 wideout. Maybe that's changed now with, how good Elijah Moore has been. But, Davis is locked in as at least the number 2 target in this passing game. And again, I still think there's a chance he leads the team in targets.
Yes, I will absolutely agree that there is a chance. And it was an especially large contract versus what was a disappointing market for free agent wide receivers. So if they had not drafted Elijah Moore, I would be all over Corey Davis as a value. I'd be curious to know what his ADP would be if they didn't draft Elijah Moore, along with Jamison Crowder. I wonder if it would still be Corey Davis battling Jamison Crowder in ADP, and both of them low because nobody wants to draft Jets. But,
Yep.
We don't get to see that. So I agree, for best ball purposes, mixing in some Corey Davis. For roster management in season, I'm probably going to be pounding Elijah Moore when they have the same ADP, but at the same time admitting that there's a chance Corey Davis just outproduces him this year.
Yep, recent ADP: Elijah Moore wide receiver 50, Corey Davis wide receiver 54. Again, I'm gonna continue drafting these guys in lineup setting leagues. I think both guys, or at least one of them, are going to see enough volume to be guys I think we can trust even in lineup setting leagues.
And I mean, it's the kind of pair that you could grab both of them at, say, like the round 10, 11, 11, 12 turn, whatever it ends up being in your draft. And maybe one of them emerges as the clear target leader. Maybe they stay close all season. Maybe it ends up being frustrating where you can't figure out week to week who's going to get more targets and produce. But that's a situation that you can go ahead and buy as your wide receiver 5 and 6.
Definitely.
Jamison Crowder, I think, is fine late. It's tough to make a strong case for him, given that they did add Corey Davis and Elijah Moore, and there are only so many targets to go around. But, an okay late shot.
Yeah, this Jets wide receiver core beyond Moore and Davis has been tough to figure out. The early reports had Keelan Cole running with the starters, and then it was they kicked Elijah Moore to the outside, and Crowder was back in the starting lineup in the slot. And then Denzel Mims has reportedly kind of come back to life. I guess he got food poisoning this spring and lost 15 pounds. I think that probably had a lot to do with his struggles in minicamp and stuff. But supposedly the past few days of training camp he's looking better, so you don't totally count him out yet either.
And we've got many viewers and listeners now saying, "Oh, I wish I could get food poisoning. I could stand to lose 15 pounds."
Right. Yeah. You just eat some bad salmon. I guess that's what he did to lose the weight.
Bad salmon is always the way to go if you're looking to get yourself sick, I think. Chris Herndon, I think, is the last guy worth really mentioning here. He's still in play, I think, as a tight end 3 for best ball. But I mean, otherwise, I'm out with no buzz around him right now.
I'm out on Herndon. I got probably too many shares early. Back in the winter drafting. I don't know. It just sounds like it's been ugly for him. And, after what we've seen the past few years, maybe Herndon's rookie year was the outlier. And, maybe he's just not good. It's supposedly been Tyler Kroft running ahead of Herndon as the Jets starter. So until we get some good news on Herndon, I'm just out on him.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he's going to turn into Austin Seferian-Jenkins here.
Sad.
Who I like, guess. It's Elijah Moore. It's the only Jet I really like, and I'm going to wind up with plenty of them by the start of the season.
Yes, I'm trying to scoop up as much more as I can right now. This offense in general just super. It might be the cheapest offense in the NFL. Again, you have no wide receivers higher than wide receiver 50 in ADP. Zack Wilson's quarterback 26, Michael Carter running back 29. So I've been taking some shots on a lot of these Jets. Again, I just think I don't think it's going to be I don't even think it's going to be a top half of the league NFL offense, but I think it could be 20th or 22nd, which would be a pretty big improvement from what we saw under Adam Gase the past couple of years.
And especially with game scripts that should favor passing volume, I think that should help the values across the board.
Yep.
Who I don't side, there's no strong dislike because, as you mentioned, nobody is really all that expensive. Michael Carter is not somebody I've been drafting or targeting. A share here or there, but my biggest problem probably in taking him is why should I take him over Trey Sermon in the same range?
Right. Yeah, that's fair. I haven't drafted a ton of Michael Carter. I also don't mind where he's going. The only dislike for me, has kind of become Chris Herndon. It's sad. I wanted to give him one more chance, but I think you gotta adjust to the news that's coming in, and I've adjusted and I've jumped ship on Chris Herndon.
And it's at least it's easier to toss a tight end 3 overboard from your fantasy drafting.
Right, exactly.
That's going to do it for this final episode of the Divisional Preview Series. Head over to DraftSharks.com now. See exactly how we project every player that we discussed today. Put our projections to work in our shiny new draft war room. We will sync with your league. We will give you customized rankings to fit your specific format. Join us tonight for the last stream in the Draft Sharks Invitational Series of drafts. Another loaded room of drafters going at it tonight. You should also join us in the free Draft Sharks Discord. The link is out there in basically every podcast post at this point. Lots of discussion there. And we're drafting a crowdsourced FFPC main event team there. So you can help craft that team with us by voting at every single turn in the draft. So join us, come on board, talk, do whatever you want in there. Unless it's spam, then we're going to boot you. For Garrett Smola and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaaf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.